It's wonderful to be here. Thank you very much, and thanks for that slightly over-generous welcome, Duncan. It was very kind of you, and very flattering. 30 years in Horsforth, 30 years at Lister Hill Baptist Church, and now we live in the wonderful seaside town of Whitby, where do come and see us. It's a great place to be, and it's a great place to live. Victorian philanthropy is something which I've spent a lot of time. I had a privilege for a number of years to working up at Leeds Trinity, doing some teaching up there, and this was my research topic. And had my life been slightly different in terms of I'd stayed there, I would have finished my PhD, but I didn't. I went and did other stuff, and it's sitting in a box. And every now and then it winks at me saying, I'm still here. It will never be finished. But it's a really, really interesting issue and one that's close to my heart. And as I've been preparing, what I've been trying to do is not make it a 3-hour lecture. Okay, so I've cut it down to 2 hours. And we'll have a break halfway through so you can refresh yourselves. To start where I think you always have to start when we think about Christian response to need. Luke chapter 19, verse 10. Previous to that, Zacchaeus. My favourite character. Because he was a goof. And he got all sorts of things wrong. And yet it all ended up well for him. But Jesus took some criticism and was told that he shouldn't be spending time with people like Zacchaeus. And he said, the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which is lost. And that verse was picked up by the Victorian Philanthropists, particularly Barnardo, who started an organisation, I can't remember its name. Sometimes I'll pause just to let you catch up, all right. And he said, and that was one of his taglines, if you like, his straplines in modern-day parlance, for the Barnardo's movement, to seek and to save that which is lost. And there's a really important depth to that, because what they were saying, and what Barnardo was saying, what others are saying is, this is about work, and mostly about children who are lost. Okay? And our mission as men and women of faith, but also, I would argue, our mission as human beings is to address the need in our community, in our society. And as I go through the 3 that I've picked tonight, I'll just try and help us understand a bit about what it was that they came to see and what it was they were motivated with. Victorian philanthropy, a significant moment in Christian welfare movement. Somebody described this as the age of charitable societies. Now, later on as I talk, I will mention some of the difficulties and some of the risks around that. But this was a moment, the moment of the beginning of the welfare state, the beginning of society taking responsibility for its citizens. Now let me just do a little bit of a history lesson for 1 minute. Until the Industrial Revolution, which sort of came to an end in about 1840, 1760 to 1840, that sort of period, our economy and our country and our life was rural, was based around villages. And the villages had their own loyalty. And forgive the language, this is the language of the day, and it's not language that I would use now. But each village looked after their own. And if they had what they would refer to as a village idiot, the village idiot was their village idiot. And if anybody outside the village was unkind to them, they would go and sort that out. Okay? So it was a rural economy, a rural life, and the village lived together, and there wasn't the separation of childhood and adulthood. You were a babe in arms, or you were useful on the farm. Okay? So the notion of childhood as we see it now is relatively new. So we moved to 1834 and the Poor Law and the workhouses and the notion of deserving and undeserving poor. But this whole idea that the state, that society, that we have a right and an investment and also a duty to speak into private family life. Now that's something that has been really, really controversial, and as a social worker, sometimes I don't admit I'm a social worker because people growl. All right? But the philanthropists were individuals responding to poverty and destitution, and they saw around them. What do I mean? Children living on the streets. Children, babies being abandoned because their parents, their mother, couldn't afford to raise them. So babies being left essentially very often to die. Children who lived from a very young age, 6, 7 years old, independently from family, ragged, and I'll come back to that phrase in a minute, shoeless, tatty, uneducated, and of course, involved in crime. Of course. And I say of course because how could they eat? How could they survive? And if you've watched Les Miserables, there's one person in the country who hasn't watched Les Miserables, so it might be you. You know, at the beginning of it, you're a thief, I stole a loaf of bread. My sister's child was close to death. Why did he steal a loaf of bread? Not because he was feckless, not because he was a criminal, because he was trying to meet the need of his sister's child. Okay? So what they saw was this balance. And what they saw was a need to do something more structured about it. And they got themselves in all sorts of exciting movements as we go there. All of it motivated by Christian faith. And one of the really interesting things, if you go back in the history of our social welfare systems, most of it started from people who were motivated by their Christian faith. Most of it. And then when the welfare state came in, that became the state's responsibility and the churches moved out of it. I have to say that I think that these days it's our time to move back into it. So the characteristics of Victorian philanthropy, a blend of saving souls, social ambition, fear and guilt. Now, there's a toxic mix, isn't it? Okay. So part of it was absolutely saving souls. I have a book at home called In Darkest England and the Way Out, written by Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army. It's a fantastic book. I've got a first edition copy of it, and in the back there's a copy of the pledge. All right? It's a really interesting book. Two things very briefly. One is, he was the first person that I've found in this sort of era who said, if we don't collect data, we'll never be able to show what we've done. Which, for those of you who are involved in any sort of work these days, and fundraising or whatever, that's very modern. And that was written in 1903 or something like that. And the other thing he said was, and this is something that I find personally more controversial, I don't mind if they live or die as long as they're saved. So his motivation was salvation, not life. Right? Now, salvation's important, but actually I don't want that to be at the cost of. I think it's both and. Social ambition, a slightly suspect, but perhaps, set of thoughts. I want to be seen as doing something good. And certainly some of the folk that I'll talk about were involved in that. Some of them weren't. Fear and guilt. I'll come back to Thomas Bowman Stevenson, who set up what is now known as Action for Children, the children's homes, national children's homes, now Action for Children. And he said, I saw this child on the street. If I didn't act, his blood would be on my hands. So fear and guilt. Lots of different motivations, some of which we need to unravel a bit. The role of women. We're talking about mid to late Victorian era. Women had no rights. Women had no vote. Women had no access to power except through their husbands. Mary Carpenter never married. So she didn't even have access to her husbands. Mary Carpenter was a deeply ferocious woman, and I'm not sure that she was much bothered about the fact that she didn't have a husband. She went and marched all over the place and got things done anyway. But it was revolutionary and remarkable, and we need to place ourselves in that era. And the other thing we need to place in that era, which is linked to it, is the role of childhood. Children should be seen and not heard. We don't want to hear about the plight of desperate children. They should be nicely wrapped up and presented to father and mother just before their bedtime. Watch Mary Poppins. And so what we have there is this idea of countercultural stuff going on. Quite radical stuff going on. Practical philanthropy. We've got to do something. Not just give money out. Do something. Create something. Build something. Open something. Offer something. And there's a modernity about that thinking as well. Don't give money. Do stuff. But then social control. Social control, if poverty was a consequence of moral failure, and it was seen as moral failure, it was our job, as the good people, as the wealthy people, as those who are washed and cleaned and articulate, we need to improve the lot of the poor by education and moral instruction. Okay? Just down the road in Saltaire, Titus Salt. And it's a fascinating, I haven't got time to go into it in full detail, but Titus Salt was a huge philanthropist. He saw the plight of the workers in his factory in Bradford. They were struggling with all sorts of respiratory conditions and it was rotten. So he moved everybody out to this massive mill in Saltaire. First clue, Saltaire. Who names a whole village after yourself? Andyville. Actually, that's quite good, isn't it? Yeah. And he gave them housing, and he gave them a boating lake and a park, and he gave them the Workers' Educational Institute, and he gave them a church. Fantastic. Clean, fresh air, lots to do. No pub in Saltaire. If you were found drinking, you were sacked. Okay? If you weren't in church, you were sacked. If more than 4 boats were out on the lake at any one point, you were sacked. So which one was he? Philanthropist or an egotist? You pick. Okay? This is not... And I'm sorry if you wanted to come and have a nice story. This is not a story of marvellous people doing marvellous things all the time, and there's no criticism. Okay? Victorian philanthropy is complex, but because it's complex, first of all, it's really interesting, and secondly, it's had legs. Sort of theology. I am not a theologian. All right? I have done no theological training. So forgive me, those of you who are theologically trained, those of you who are substantially cleverer than me, forgive me if I get this bit wrong. I've tried to do the research. But the theology of the philanthropist was that salvation and social relief are inextricably linked. You can't have one without the other. And that was contrary to William Booth. That was contrary to William Booth. Except that later on in his life, I think he got a bit more clear about that. We are stewards of our wealth. It doesn't belong to us. All things come from you, and of your own do we give you. Okay? Our wealth, our belongings, we are custodians of to use for God's glory. We're not owners of it because we're clever, or we've done well, or we came up with whatever the equivalent of the pools were in 1863. That was a joke. Thank you. We have an individual need to meet the needs of others. And this is very personal. And this isn't about we the organisation, we the church, we the group, we the whatever. It's I. If I see a need, if I see a child living destitute on the streets of London, or Leeds, or Whitby, I have a personal duty, a personal, godly, God-given responsibility to meet that need. Okay? So a few verses there. Open your hand to the poor, Deuteronomy 15. Proverbs 9, whoever is kind to the poor lends to God. And then the book that I find myself turning to when I do this sort of thing, James. James chapter 1 and verse 22, be doers of the word, not just hearers. It's a really substantial challenge. Congratulations for hearing. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Now, this is not, please understand, this is not a guilt trip, and this is not me somehow saying, if you don't, or if you haven't, or if you won't, then that is bad, and if you do and you have and you will, that's good. What I'm saying is, we have a responsibility each to work through some of this stuff. So some common themes: Christian faith, social conscience, it's countercultural, determined. I'm going to talk to you for a moment about Thomas Coram. Thomas Coram was not a Victorian. He was earlier than that. And Thomas Coram was a sea captain. And when he was home on whatever you call it, off his boat, and he was in, that sounds terrible, doesn't it? When he was not sailing, and he was in London, all right, he saw these children. And what he saw specifically was 2 babies who had been abandoned on a rubbish heap, and both were dead. And he said, this isn't okay. And from that, he took 17 years to build the first foundling hospital in this country. And a foundling hospital is exactly what it sounds. If you're a foundling, you can be taken, and they will take the baby in. Okay? If you have 3 or 4 hours to spare in London, and you can't think of what else to do, go to the Coram Museum. It's about 20 minutes walk from King's Cross Station. Quite extraordinary and quite moving. Because one of the things it's got is it's got tokens. So if I'm a mother and I take my baby to the foundling hospital, I break a button in half. And I'll keep half the button, and I'll give half the button to the hospital. Because I say, when I'm on my feet, I will come back, match the button, and rescue my child. Hardly ever happened. It's very powerful. Very, very powerful. So, and one of the things that the Coram Hospital did every year was that they had a concert. A Handel used to conduct the Messiah every year, and it was packed out. It was like the first Live Aid. And it was so popular that ladies were asked not to wear hooped skirts so they could get more people in. Good stuff, that, isn't it? Yeah. So do go and have a look. Just outside the hospital, there's a bit of grass. Not a massive bit of grass, but a grass. And there's still the sign there. And it says, no adults may enter this park unless accompanied by a child. No. Which is great, really. So that came from determined. Coram was incredibly determined. He was so dogged about his fundraising and nagging, and you read some of the stuff in his pamphlets and you think, goodness me, what a pain. Mm-hmm. But he did something quite remarkable. And then Mary Carpenter, similar behaviour. And then this complex thing around deserving and undeserving poor, which, and I'm not, please understand me, I'm not here to do a political polemic today. Whatever you think politically, whatever you think about poverty, where do we get right deserving and undeserving poor? Because it's a really complex issue. And there's no simple one answer. I don't believe there's a simple answer to it, but that's a theme that we need to be mindful of. So other things, there's dear old Thomas Coram at the top, 1668 to 1751. 17 years he took to build the Foundling Hospital. He became the chairman of the board of the Foundling Hospital. Within 2 years, the board sacked him. And he never had anything to do with the Foundling Hospital again, because he was such a pain in the neck. Isn't that interesting? He was horrid to people, particularly to the matron. And my experience of matrons is never be horrid to matrons. So again, what's going on here? Flawed people doing good things. But there's another list. Here we go. Elizabeth Fry, Florence Nightingale, Octavia Hill, William Booth, Lord Shaftesbury, Angela Burda Coates, Charles Dickens, George Muller, and many, many more. I got quite excited when I was making that list and I got a bit ridiculous, so I had to cut it down. Let me say something about Charles Dickens. If you are a reader, read Oliver Twist. Okay? Don't watch the film, read the book. It's an extraordinary treatise on poverty and on exploitation of boys into criminal gangs. Okay? So you know that you consider yourself, all that sort of stuff. It wasn't all happy and stuff. Go out there and steal things and bring it back and I'll put it in my tin. I'll put it in my pocket. You can sleep here, I might give you some food, but please understand. In modern day parlance, in the world of my social work these days, this is criminal exploitation. And do read it. It's a quite amazing book. And I love it. And then once you've read that, read David Copperfield. Not because it's anything to do with this, it's just a lovely, lovely book. So there you are. I could have discussed those, but I'm not going to. Thomas John Barnardo, 1845 to 1905. Never qualified as a doctor. He left his medical studies to become the superintendent of children's homes. He moved to London to train as a missionary to go and work in China. But what he saw as he was walking around London was deprivation of children. And particularly, he came across a boy called Jim Jarvis. And Jim Jarvis had come to his ragged school, which I'll come back to in a moment. And at the end of the school, Barnardo said, "It's time to go home, lad. Mother will be wondering where you are." And Jim Jarvis said, "I haven't got a home. I haven't got a mother." And Barnardo said, "Well, where do you sleep?" And he took him to a rooftop over a bakery. And there were 15 boys sleeping on the roof. And from that, Barnardo said, "We can't have this. We're going to open some children's homes." Ragged schools were for people who couldn't afford schooling. This is well before universal education, well before. But those who could afford posh clothes could go to school. But ragged schools were for people who could come in rags. And the great thing about ragged schools was, it wasn't just children, it was anybody. And they were taught to write their name and do some sums. And that was it. It wasn't like they didn't do geography or home economics. They write their name, do some sums. Really, really radical stuff. Why is it radical? Because many thinkers of the time said there's no point in educating the poor. They're not clever enough. It's a waste of our time. It's a waste of our money. They don't deserve it. So the ragged schools were counter to common thought of the day. We don't want to do this. There's no point. And one of the things that Barnardo was particularly interested in is vocational training. So the boys learned carpentry, and the boys learned other stuff like that, trades, and the girls went into service, learned being a maid, Downton Abbey and all that. So what you've got here is Barnardo not just saying, right, I'll give you somewhere to live, and I'll give you a bit of food. I'll teach you to write your name, very powerful in Victorian England. I'll teach you to do some adding up to make sure that you're not being cheated. And I'll give you a trade. And I'll set you to work. Okay? No destitute child refused permission, was hung over his homes. He would never turn someone away. And that was because of Jim Jarvis. Because what Barnardo couldn't do is allow a Jim Jarvis to go and sleep on a roof above a bakery. And so he said, I'm going to do something about this. And he opened his children's homes and his ragged schools. Thomas Bowman Stephenson. A good name while we're in the Methodist chapel. A Methodist minister. Again, was probably training, it's believed he was training, to go to be a missionary in China. But again, he saw poverty and deprivation in London. And he couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't do nothing about it. He had to do something. But he was a real radical. He was a real radical. He believed that women had a fundamental role in ministry, not just social welfare ministry, in ministry and in care. And he was the person that set up the Society of Deaconesses, who actually for many years ran many of the children's homes. So when I first started working in 1387, I worked for National Children's Home. That was a joke. 1387. Thank you. I worked for National Children's Home, and there were deaconesses that worked alongside me. And that wasn't that long ago, actually. Christian ministry must address real human suffering. He was absolutely not on the fence. He was explicitly clear. If we have a faith, we must do something about human misery, human suffering. More radically, he refused to accept that poverty was a moral failing. And some of the pamphlets that he wrote and some of the things that he argued was that poverty, sometimes people made poor choices, I'm paraphrasing, sometimes people made poor choices, but that doesn't mean that they are feckless. It doesn't mean that they have morally failed. Now again, we in this room will have different views about that. But he was very clear that poverty is not a moral failing. He set up children's homes. But what he said was, every children's home I set up has to have a family environment. And so the people that ran it were called mother and father. And then for years and years, house mother and house father. And so he was saying, This is not the workhouse. The workhouse is when you are destitute and we will take you in but will not give you a nice time. Stevenson said, I will take you in, I will have you living with mother and father in a family environment. Some of the readings that you do, it's like, that was chaotic. It was bonkers, but it was a family environment. And you are welcome. And you are loved. Here we are, this is the quote from Stevenson. Ragged, shoeless, filthy, their faces I can't read today, I do apologise. Pinched with hunger and premature wretchedness. And I began to feel that now as my time was come, here were my poor little brothers and sisters, sold to hunger and the devil, and I could not be free of their blood if I did not do something to save some of them. That was his motivation. But the description is powerful. Premature wretchedness. And we're talking about children of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're not talking about teenagers. It's like young children who have been abandoned. And my favourite, Mary Carpenter. Fearsome Mary Carpenter. She opened ragged schools for girls and for boys. Revolutionary. If you have to educate boys, what's the point of educating girls? Absolutely none. They're going to go into service. They don't need to write their name. They don't need to add up. Can they sew? Can they clean? Can they do whatever maids do? If they can, marvellous. Carpenter said, no. My homes, I will open homes for boys, and I will open homes for girls. Now, this is again where Mary Carpenter got even more revolutionary. She was into criminal justice. And she was a fierce opponent of the way that the criminal justice system worked with our children. And what we're talking about at the time was children being routinely transported for theft, for begging, for violence. A boy was transported in 1901 for swearing at a public racecourse. I've never been at a public racecourse. I dare say that there might be some swearing going on. I don't think we transport people today, but he was. But what she said was, we shouldn't be punishing children when they are simply following the behaviour of adults. She actually had no problem with adults being punished, by the way. But we were hanging children. The last child to be hanged was something like, it's gone from me now, about 1930 something. He was 17. And what Carpenter said was, if our children are watching adults behave, if they're behaving badly at the behest of adults, what is it for us if we punish them? Because they're just doing what they should be doing. They're behaving. They're obeying. They're obeying their parents. And so she wrote lots and lots and lots of papers, and the 1984 Criminal Justice Act was partly authored by her. A woman in late Victorian England. Forgive me, ladies, I'm sorry, but this is the truth of the time. Children should be educated more than being punished. And then, even worse, she was anti-slavery. She was a friend of Shaftesbury. She wrote pamphlets with Shaftesbury. She campaigned against it. And the reason she was formidable is that she never, ever, ever took no as an answer. And if she got a no, she'd just go back for more, and go back for more, and go back for more. And I'm quite sure that at times, all right then. All right then, talk to me. Or here's some money for another children's home, or another ragged school, or another reformatory. Now, understand reformatories weren't lovely places. And the reformatories turned into the parlance of reform schools, Borstals, and then all points north from there. Carpenter had 6 principles. And I think that they're really interesting. I think that they're really modern. Treatment should be founded on the love of the child. The first thing we should do when we come across a child who we are concerned about, who is living on the streets, who is stealing, who is whatever, swearing at public racecourses, whatever they're doing, is love them. That needs to be the first and fundamental part of our work. And we're in Leeds tonight. Child-friendly Leeds. Very modern. Very modern. Mary Carpenter thought about it nearly 100 years ago. Change requires the cooperation of the child. You cannot force a child to change. My experience over quite a lot of years in the work that I've been doing is shouting at people never changes behaviour. They might well stop doing what they're doing to start at the moment, but it won't change their behaviour. So, Carpenter says, we need to work with them. We need to work in with cooperation. And that's a sophisticated thinking. That's sophisticated work. And that's something that I would argue is very, very fundamental to work today with children and young people. Work is a means to an end, not an end in itself. So the work ethic stuff, the sort of Protestant work ethic, that sort of, you work because it's good and work is what you should be doing. Work gives us the ability to do other things. And that's the truth for me today. Why have I worked for all these years? Because I want a house, and I want a car, and I want a holiday, and I want to live in Whitby, and I want to have a nice time, and I want to do all the things that I do. I also love my work, by the way. It is also a delight. But work is a means to an end, not an end in itself. Play is as important as work. We don't talk enough about play and children and play. Play is so important. And we all play. I've got a couple of friends in Whitby. I've got 2 friends. You impressed?
Yes.
Yeah, 2. No, really. And sometimes I ring up, and if one of their wives answers, I say, is John coming out to play tonight? And she said, oh, what are you talking about? But that's what it is. Do you want to come out to play? If you want to have a really, really, really fun time, invite your friends round for a board game evening. Play. Just muck about. It's good. Corporal punishment is reduced to a minimum. She didn't believe in not beating children, but she said we shouldn't do it very often. And when we do it, it has to be purposeful. Now, let me be really clear. We can't do that these days, so just strike that one. All right? Don't say, oh, Andy Lloyd said you can beat children, but only occasionally. Please understand you can't. And the approach should be educational and should be based on Christianity. I like those 6 principles because they speak very much into the idea that we're trying to change the lives of children for the better by being kind, by being hopeful. Right, here's some controversies, because we ought to have some controversies, shouldn't we? Philanthropic abduction. Hello, you're not looking after your child very well. I'll take them, and I'll look after them better. All right? I'm off now, with a child under each arm. All right? And that happened a lot. There's a very good film and book called Oranges and Sunshine about children who were sent across to Australia. And they were sent across to Australia and had been told their parents had died, their parents didn't want them. And this was relatively modern. This was in the last 50 years. Philanthropic abduction was happening, and also child migration. Send them on boats, get rid of them, as far away as possible. We can't move away from the fact that that was wrong. And what happened there was, the philanthropists took their eye off Carpenter's principles. And they said, we know best. We know best. Eugenics. The idea that only some people should be allowed to have children and some people shouldn't. Forced sterilisation. Removal of children at birth. Stuff like that. And Mary Carpenter, although she's a real heroine of mine, was really into eugenics towards the end of her life. When I read that, I was really cross with her. She's been dead all these years. Really cross with her. 100 and odd years. I didn't want her to think that, but she did. And she did because she thought it was right. But she'd lost sight of her own principles. This idea of a deserving and undeserving poor, which is a live conversation right the way through our society and right the way through our society today. You deserve help. You don't deserve help. Do we need to finish?
No, just keep enunciating.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, you're dropping your voice a bit at the end when you're getting so involved.
I'm boring myself.
No, you're
Not you. I will speak better. Sorry. Deserving and undeserving poor. What do we think about that? And I'm not going to tell you the answer because I think it's too complicated for me to tell you the answer. I'll tell you what I think, privately. But what do you think? It's too cheap a trick to say everybody deserves everything, or them lot don't deserve anything because their behaviour is such that they have removed their right to help. I don't believe that either of those work if you try and take it into our faith and the call to seek and to save that which is lost. A woman called Madge Bray wrote a book called Poppies on the Rubbish Heap. And she says this: a child's current behaviour is often an essentially sane response to an untenable set of life circumstances. If a child is living in untenable life circumstances, Jim Jarvis, and many children today, that will affect their behaviour. If any of you in this room are living in untenable life circumstances, that will affect your behaviour. A number of years ago, my daughter rang me in tears. She'd had a car accident. And I was on the train from Horsforth into Leeds to go to my office in the Merrion Centre. And she was upset. I mean, she wasn't hurt, but the car was hurt, and she was shaken. And I said, is everybody there? And there were people there. And I said, okay, wait for the pickup to come and get your car and take it to wherever it's going. And then go home. I'll come and see you. And because I'm privileged, and because I had the money, I got off in Horsforth, I jumped on a train to Manchester, I bought a ticket, I then jumped on a train to Manchester, that's the way of doing it, isn't it? Got off in Manchester, got a taxi from Manchester Piccadilly to her student accommodation, a hovel in the wherever it was. And I thought as I was on the train, if I hadn't have had the money, I would have jumped on the train and not paid. Now, you can think whatever you like, but I know that I would, because that was my daughter, and she needs me. And so I will go. deserving and undeserving poor, untenable life circumstances and behaviour. These are things that we need allow ourselves to wrestle with. And the philanthropists wrestled with it, and so do we. Okay. Our faith can't be passive. I think I feel this more strongly than anything else in what I've been saying. We can't have a faith which is passive. It's got to motivate us to do something. Whatever that something is. And it's not for me to say what that something is. And for each of us it will be different. But we can't just go, oh, that's nice. I believe that we've got to do more than that. See the world and the need around you. See the Jim Jarvis. See the babies abandoned on a rubbish heap. And do something about it. Be really careful that we don't get into pride or false heroicism. This isn't about me being clever, me being nice, and certainly not me having my name in headlines or headlights. And don't tolerate injustice. Andy, what's injustice? Another conversation for another day.
Brilliant. Can I just say a big thank you?
Yes. Philanthropic abduction. And as a social worker, particularly if you're a child social worker, you must have had to move into situations and abduct children from their homes and their parents because of abuse.
Yeah.
I'd just like to comment on that.
Yeah, I think that what I would say fairly clearly about that is I have removed children. Okay, I've done it under the auspices of the law, and the law is the Children Act 1989, and it's a very good piece of legislation, and it gives certain circumstances where a child is suffering or is at risk of suffering significant harm, and then you can go to the court. So but I have never removed a child without permission of the court. Because without that, that's called kidnapping, and broadly speaking, deemed inappropriate.
To a large extent, it's your decision.
Well, I would argue it's not just my decision. I will write the report, but it was the organisation decision, but also the court's decision, and the magistrate's or the judge's decision. It's a very, very, very grave thing to do. I will argue it's the right thing to do sometimes, because sometimes people treat children very badly. Okay? So, and that we have to have that protection in law. What I'm talking about here with abduction is not going through due process. Right. Me coming up to a mother and a child and saying, you're not looking after your child, I'm going to take them. And I'm going to put them in my ragged school, or I'm going to put them in my children's home, and you won't see them again. So I think there is a fundamental difference, which is due process and law versus me just waltzing around thinking I'm right and you're bad.
Thank you.
All right?
We've looked at people today who worked in a society where Christianity was the major religion.
Yes.
How do we apply that in today's world where perhaps Christianity is no longer the dominant religion?
Well, I mean, it's a fair question, and much. I'm not sure I'm well placed to answer, but my answer would be, I don't think I say something radical when I say our children deserve the very best. Now, it's a requirement in law that I mention my granddaughter. Okay? It's a requirement. My granddaughter is 3. Okay? I will walk over broken glass for my granddaughter. I want the very, 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 very best for her. Now, I don't think that's particularly peculiar, because I'm grandpa. But what about the 175,000 children that live in Leeds? And are we saying about each one of them, we want the best? Now, I don't think that that's a terribly deep theological point, and I don't think it matters about, in that context, about what faith we might be or of no faith. What we're saying is, these children deserve the best. My motivation is my professional training and experience, but also my faith. And I don't think that that's a contradiction. And others who believe other things can join me in that quest if they believe that we want the best for children. So I don't think it's a contradiction. I think it's complicated, you're right, but I don't think it's a contradiction, and I don't think it should be something that we think, oh, we can't do this. We've just got to do what we can.
And even if it's not the best, you could ask the same question, say, would that be good enough for my child? And if it's not good enough for my child, then why would he tolerate it for someone else's child?
Yes.
Pete.
The people you mentioned recognise the difficulties that children are facing then. What do you think are the difficulties, particularly at our age now?
Wow.
Would you just
So
say that question?
the question is, the philanthropists were responding to what the need was then. What are children facing now? This will be a personal response. I'm no politician. I'm not clever enough. There's a wonderful word that I'm not sure exists, but is becoming exist. Adultification. And adultification is when we turn children into adults and expect them to behave like adults. Now, children's brains develop, and they develop slowly, and then they develop fast, then they slow down again, and then by the time they get to around the early 20s, they're not doing too badly. Okay? Typically. And I think that what we do, and what we have done over the years, over the last 40 years, I would say, probably a bit more, is ask our children to do two things that's very confusing. One is, be lovely children who do the right thing and behave nicely. And secondly, be adults before their time. Now, what do children do? They learn by making mistakes. They learn by doing things and being advised that that's not a great way of doing things. Children are noisy. I have 3 children who are now all adults, and they've all left home, and that's lovely. I do love them very much. But I discovered in their teenage years there was only one point to being a teenager, and that was to irritate me. But what I discovered as well is, actually, the point of being an adult is to irritate children. I'm being flippant. I think that we ask our children to grow up too quickly. I think we ask our children to take on responsibility for all sorts of decisions that should sit with adults. Okay? And I'll not go into all those decisions, but we just need to be really careful that when we pile on responsibility onto children and they get it wrong, my fault, not theirs. Okay? So I think that's one of the issues. I think the other issues that we challenge with is the ubiquitous nature of social media, information, all that sort of stuff. Please understand me, I don't hate the internet. I think it's fab. I drove home from Cardiff at lunchtime today. I used an app on my phone to tell me where to go, including trying to navigate the M6 around Birmingham. So well done, internet, it's good. Okay? But we as adults have created that. Let's not tell our children off for misunderstanding it. And I think that one of the things that I would like to really advocate is, look, let's be kinder to our children. Did anybody other than me hang around on a street corner in the evening? Not if you did. Okay, I did, and I made a noise. And I was probably irritating. It's what children do. It's what children do. Let's be kinder to our children. I could do a whole lot more.
Yeah, I was going to make the comment and also the question that in the 19th century, people like George Muller and the other person, Barnardo, there was a freedom within their institutions to be Christian.
Yep.
So George Muller would pray and he would talk to his children. do you not think we've flipped where now there's a huge pressure to be very secular and to completely get rid of God?
Well, yeah, I think to a degree, yes, but I haven't. And I've had a 44-year career. I don't think you have to. I think you have to be wise. And I think that George Muller was an extraordinary man living in the 1800s, the late 1800s, who did amazing things. It's different today, and I think that I want to have respect for the law of the land, because without respect for the law of the land, we're in chaos. Does it challenge sometimes? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But I don't think it's undoable, and I don't think that we should be anxious about it being undoable. Let's just do it.
I just wanted to say how much poverty is hidden today. I'm thinking of the Leeds school teacher who discovered that her children, that many of them did not have a bed
Bed,
to work.
Yes.
I think it's an amazing
Yes.
example of one person
Yes.
setting up something that really made a difference.
Yes. So this lady is talking about an astonishing organisation called Zarek, who, if a child hasn't got a bed, they will provide a bed, and not just a bed, but bedding and all sorts of pillows and all that sort of stuff. And it's a tremendous thing because those children were living without a bed, and poverty is a real live issue, a real live issue today. What happens about poverty? Why are people poor? Why have people spent all their money? Well, for a whole bagload of reasons. But lots and lots and lots of people, and I will say this with a little bit of knowledge, lots and lots of people are not living with no money because they're spending it all on whatever. They just don't have enough money. And food is getting more expensive, and heating is getting more expensive. And the stories you read are true. I don't like them, but they're true. Shall I eat or shall I heat? They're issues. And I feel enormously privileged. I quite often walk into my house and say, praise the Lord for central heating. Because it's cold in Whitby sometimes. There were 3 days last year it wasn't. It was lovely. But it's cold. And I walk into a warm, dry house with food in the cupboard and electricity. Many, many, many people don't, and that's not okay.
I think we've got time for one more comment or question. If anyone has one they would really like to share.
I came across in my own experience my friend at school, best friend at school, his parents ran a boys' home in Croydon.
All right.
Under the auspices of the Mission of Hope.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And that was run by two ladies called Adelaide Wallace, that very sort of some of these strange names.
Yes.
That was for illegitimate children.
Yes, yes. And there's a whole narrative that we haven't got time to go into around children, children born.
And in fact, my sister's son was sent to Australia.
Really? Wow.
But in fact, he got a good home.
Well, that's good. That's good. And I'm glad he did. Many didn't. Yeah.
Anne, there's still space.
Go on.
Well, just a comment. I think as Christians, I think it's time to get rid of this dilemma of deserving and undeserving poor, because I don't think it's biblical at all. The scriptures always talks about restoring people. You talk about the year of Jubilee, and when Jesus went around healing, he was restoring them to wholeness. He didn't say, get on your knees and say, you're going to trust me first, or are you deserving? So it's about restoring people and enabling them to flourish. So I think it's time to get rid of that one.
I would agree.
The reason being, because I think also the Bible also says that we are supposed to do meaningful work and to do something useful with your hands. And I think there is also a school of thought that you can enable poverty by not equipping people to work. So I think
that was my point.
Oh,
my point is about restoring people so that they are able, so they're able to develop their lives rather than having this false division. And you get a bit of charity and you don't, but the emphasis should be around enabling structures and supporting people so that they're
Yeah.
able to work and you know, do the things that enable their lives to flourish.
And the great thing is, what we've just heard here is a play out of Stevenson versus Booth. That's how it works. That's how it works.
We knew that, we did.
Yeah, yeah. And that's how complex it is. That's why it's complex, and that's why I haven't come with answers. I'm going to go back to here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Our call is to seek and sustain that which is lost.